Hi there. Let's look in this topic video at barriers to entry in monopolistic markets. The standard monopoly diagram shows us that a firm is likely to be making supernormal profits, as shown by the shaded area. Of course, in a competitive market, the entry of new firms into the industry causes those profits to be competed away until the representative firm is making just normal profit. But this is not the case in monopoly, because the monopolist, the firm with market power, may be able to take advantage of barriers to entry. Now, these barriers prevent entrants from threatening the profits of the incumbent or the existing firm. So we're going to be looking in this short topic video at some examples of barriers to entry in different markets. I think one of the fundamental advantages of the existing established firm will be that they've probably got lower unit costs because they've been able to achieve economies of scale. Here's a good example of showing this. Let's say that firm B is the potential rival, a smaller business looking to enter the market. Firm A is the established firm, and even at output Q1, the similar output, firm A has a significant unit cost advantage, shown by the vertical distance between A and B. Well, why might that be the case? First of all, firm A has been in the market for some time and may have been able to take advantage of learning economies of scale. In other words, there's a process of learning by doing, learning from your mistakes, oftentimes finding subtle but important improvements in production processes, reorganizing production, all of which can give a firm a cost advantage. That can be reinforced by vertical integration. We'll look at some examples in a second. Vertical integration gives the established business greater control over the supply chain, and that can also involve cost savings. I've put point 3 as lower customer churn. Well, what lower churn means is that it's more expensive to sell to a new customer than it is to market and sell to an existing customer. And if you can have substantial brand loyalty in the market, that again is a significant cost gain. And we've done a separate topic video on this, but many firms with market power have buying power, purchasing power in the market. We call that monopsony, and that allows them to purchase their raw materials, their components, even perhaps their labour resources at a cheaper price than a new firm coming in. So economies of scale are a key barrier to entry in many markets, but not every market. Here's again another way of showing this cost advantage. On the left hand side we draw a cost curve, a long run average cost curve, where the minimum efficient scale is a relatively low level of output compared to the size of the market. In this situation there are barriers to entry, but they're low, and there's room for many firms to reach the minimum efficient scale. You expect to see a competitive industry. Whereas in the right hand side we look at the average cost curve perhaps of a natural monopoly. That's typically a network industry, an industry with many high fixed costs associated with building the infrastructure. And as you increase your output from Q1 through to Q4, the unit cost keeps falling. So the established scaled business will have a much lower cost than the firm coming in, for example, starting off at an output level Q1. Vertical integration is a good example of a barrier to entry. Vertical integration is when you buy different businesses at different points of the supply chain in the same industry. Film distributors owning cinemas, brewing companies owning pubs going forward to the consumer, or buying a hop farm heading backwards towards the source of their materials. A pig processing business buying a pig farm. And lots of vertical integration in businesses such as Coca-Cola, owning bottling plants, and increasingly in the technology sector there's a couple of examples there of vertical integration. A third important barrier to entry is the strength of brand or consumer loyalty for your product. Clearly, if you have a lot of loyalty, then it makes it harder and more expensive potentially for new firms to come in. Now, smart, savvy new firms that really get social media can scale up very quickly. It's not necessarily a disadvantage for those types of businesses, but often in consumer-facing industries, whatever it is, different brands of detergent, favourite types of fast food, what have you, telecommunications, customer lock-ins make it very hard for new firms. Here's a good example in the smartphone industry. There are some big players. I wonder what's happened to BlackBerry. But in terms of brand retention, keeping existing customers, Apple is some way ahead of the competition. And this is a table showing an estimated ranking of the world's most valuable brands in 2015. All of these, of course, are huge scale businesses. They have the benefit of big barriers to entry. Can any firm threaten the dominance of Apple or Google? Well, intuitively, probably not in the short term, but 10-15 years ago, people were saying that Microsoft was a dominant monopoly in operating systems, and they were the Google or the Apple of their day. And now, of course, they're under intense competitive pressure. But these are the world's most valuable brands. I'm not sure whether Tutor 2 is on the next slide in terms of that. We must have made pretty close to the top 10, surely. Here are some other entry barriers that are worth mentioning in essays. In many industries, there are legal or statutory entry barriers. So, for example, you might have to have a license to operate as a taxi company in a city centre. You might have been awarded a franchise. Camelot, for example, have the franchise to run the National Lottery, and train operating companies bid for the franchises to run particular lines on the system. Entry barriers may have been created artificially through the use of import controls, such as tariffs and quotas. And of course, there's the intellectual property protection that comes from trademarks, from copyright law, from patents more generally, which typically give businesses a long-run barrier to the entry of a rival firm until the patent expires, in which case the entry barriers do come down and allow for the entry of generic products. So far we've looked at 3: economies of scale, vertical integration, brand loyalty. It's important as a business to have control of those important technologies, and I suppose patents come under that category. Here are the firms in the world with the largest research and development spending in 2014. And there's some huge names here, many of them linked with telecommunications, with drugs, pharmaceuticals, with internet search, and of course with the car industry. So high research and development spending, if it leads to a large number of patents being applied for and granted, can act as a barrier to entry. A 5th important barrier to entry, not often mentioned by students, but I think worth considering, is the significance of expertise, company reputation, and goodwill. The example I've chosen there is a business such as Quick Fit, or perhaps a business such as Timpson Shoes. Customers often go to these businesses across generations. They've had their cars checked and their tyres refitted by Quick Fit, over the life cycle of 3 or 4 different vehicles. It's massively important in lots of consumer-facing industries to have a brand expertise and goodwill. And in industries such as building, household services, that's particularly important. Occasionally, of course, you get what's called strategic barriers to entry. This is where businesses engage in certain pricing tactics designed to block or limit effective competition in the market. I've put 3 examples on this slide. The one at the bottom is brand proliferation. So if you go into a retail store and you fancy an Oreo biscuit, well, you've got one hell of a range of choice to choose from. And that's certainly true in industries such as cereals, sports drinks, products, consumer drinks and food products of all different types and descriptions, where the existing firm might just proliferate or expand the range of products that is similar within the same brand name in order to saturate the market space and just make it a little tougher for the new firms to come in. Now, on this slide, we're also looking at limit pricing and predatory pricing. One is legal and one is illegal. Do you know which is which? Limit pricing is legal. It's a pricing tactic where a business, an established monopoly for example, might reduce their average price just low enough to discourage a new entrant into the market. So this would be when a firm is prepared to sacrifice some profit, but that would be enough to make entry unprofitable for new firms. They'll still make some supernormal returns, the existing firm, but not as big. So they're moving away from profit maximization in the short term to encourage or to block the entry of new firms and hold on to their long-run position. Predatory pricing is illegal if it can be proven. And predatory pricing is when a business deliberately sets an artificial price, often below cost, to drive out of the market an existing competitor, or if they can't drive them out, to inflict some important commercial damage on that business. Now, predatory pricing is clearly anti-competitive. It's quite hard to prove, but occasionally if you go to the Competition Commission website, the CMA website, you might see some allegations of predatory pricing in action, and it's linked to the barriers to entry. Innovation itself can be a barrier to entry. If you use patent laws, you can embed the intellectual property and the ideas in your innovations, and that can give you some legal barriers. And we have discussed in the past the idea of first mover advantage. This is an idea from game theory, that the first firm into a market may be able to have some significant advantages, which then make it harder for new firms to come in. Equally, we live in a world of pretty rapid technological change, and innovation can reduce barriers to entry. So businesses successfully using the internet as a way of breaking into new markets. The open source software market, for example, has released businesses from committing themselves to expensive single proprietary sources of software. So the key point here is that technology can in some cases increase barriers to entry because digital monopolies can emerge very quickly, but it does allow small firms the platform to enter markets more cheaply and more easily in the short term. Just want to make a distinction between sustaining and disruptive innovations. So many of the new products we see in the markets are basically similar to the existing ones. There's nothing particularly unique about them. They're just the latest iteration of a product. And we call those sustaining innovations. Whereas disruptive innovations genuinely upset the apple cart. They upset the status quo. And this, of course, gave rise to Joseph Schumpeter, the Austrian school economist, coming out with his famous phrase that innovation creates gales of creative destruction. So the likes of Netflix and Spotify, Airbnb, which is people think is a travel business, it's really in the market for belonging in a particular area. They're challenging the dominant firms in their particular markets. And of course Uber, which is so successful, growing so rapidly that one day it might be able to afford to take over Tutor to You. Well, Uber is a good example, I think, of a disruptive innovation, building, for example, on the models of businesses such as Halo and Addison Lee, and building a web platform which has caused a lot of disruption and ructions in particularly the London cab market. Here are the most valuable startups in the world as of late 2015 into the spring of 2016. So the likes of Snapchat, Airbnb, Uber. They've achieved stock market valuations of astronomically high levels, despite having only started relatively recently. These are good examples to use of businesses that can overcome what might be seen as traditional textbook barriers to entry, largely because they use digital platforms as the basis for their extremely fast growth. So this has been a revision tutorial on barriers to entry in markets. I hope it's given you lots of good examples and a couple of useful analysis diagrams to help you in your exams. Please check out our YouTube channel for more videos, and of course the Tutor to You website for lots of extra economics resources. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you again sometime soon.